Choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Today is take 2 of trying to tame these Transcendent titanium tweeters. The first thing we're going to do today is take a look at the workstation. We have the tripod set up in the background. There's J and K. They're going to hang out with us today. I've got the extra laptop off to the side, topping off the charge. I think there may be something wrong with it, as the battery was completely dead after being stored with it fully charged. Here's Figured Out Fountain all fixed up. These are the Blue Octave brand speakers, and here's how they come from the seller. These tweeters are decent, but they don't seem to be matched well to the rest of the setup. They seem to be overpowered, compensating for a lack of mid-range from the woofer. This is causing some problems with the primary issue of overcomplicated, overrated, and poorly tuned crossover circuitry. The low-pass crossover is certainly too low, and I believe the high-pass crossover is as well. I'm not sure if there's a compensation situation because of a bad combination of parts or simply bad engineering. I've eventually had all 4 tweeters fail in swap speakers when they're connected to the center channel. I've come to this conclusion because the right speaker is still working since day 1, and so is the replacement left speaker that I swapped out for a blown center earlier. It's the dialogue that's destroying these tweeters because they are crossed over at too low a frequency cutoff for their actual design limitations. Something similar is going on with the woofer wiring. There's no upper mid-range at all, so it's no wonder the tweeter is working overtime to compensate. None of this was obvious and ended up being figured out step by frustrating step. Being a Dolby Surround setup, this center channel only tweeter destruction adds up in the end. So I bought an overboard amount of overboard tweeters, and it took an overboard amount of time to tame them. This tweeter puts out like a mid-range when hooked up to the Blue Octave's crossover, even though the crossover should limit even higher with a lower ohm load. These new pyramid tweeters confusingly state 8 and 4 ohm for the rating and actually measures 3.5 ohms versus the working Blue Octave tweeter reading 8 ohms. I ended up figuring out the next step was to add resistors while evaluating the crossover's tuning. The idea of tuning speakers isn't new to me, but actually doing it yourself is. I don't think they are terrible or defective speakers. I think the excessive crossover circuitry limits these speakers' potential and lowers the quality of sound substantially. For starters, I purchased these matching tweeters with a high power rating, solid build, and an extremely high frequency response of 45 kilohertz. They turned out to be way too loud, and still something just wasn't mixing right. I ordered the resistors and used tape to tame the single tweeter until the order arrived. I bought 8 because I needed a minimum of 5, but they were sold in pairs, and this 4-pack was for sale. I can use 2 of the extras in my Danville PA speakers I'll report about later, and I'm thinking about using the last one as a second center channel tweeter below the screen for extreme tuning center speaker sound vertically. These tweeters are aluminum casting with a titanium driver and 20-ounce magnet. They are a bit bigger than the tweeters I'm replacing, so I'll need to modify the Blue Octave's casings. Here's some info on crossover and ohms. Remember, the Blue Octave setup is 8 and the pyramid tweeters are, quote, 4. When you connect the speaker half the ohms that the crossover is set up for, the frequency cutoff gets higher proportionately, and the reverse is true for higher resistance, the cutoff gets lower. Simply adding a resistor would toss everything out of whack, assuming that it was correct before. To lower the volume without changing the crossover frequency requires 2 resistors and complex wiring. Just figuring out the correct resistors to order was difficult, and I was not too confident I'd get it right the first time, sort of like gambling. I've got the level so close after adding resistors that I can't figure out what's not quite right now. I'll try the 4 ohm high pass crossover capacitors that came with the pyramid tweeters instead of the Blue Octave crossovers that they're connected to now. I might try running both high pass crossovers in parallel and series eventually to judge the differences. But before I can do this, I need to solve the biggest problem of them all, the bigger speaker's frequency response. It's been way too low the entire time, but I wouldn't admit or tackle this until now. In the next video in this series, I'll actually put all these parts together properly and end up figuring out how to manipulate the low pass crossovers.
Answer the phone, Joshua!
Thanks for watching. See you on the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you care to.